Now we've got a few things on the go at the moment. First thing we can show you is the props been cleaned up. Now I needed a little bit of sanding work because, to be honest, they weren't the nicest props in the world. Lots of flash, bits of plastic hanging off and everything else. So sanded them up with sanding sponge and polished them up and just sprayed them flat black. Now a nice little technique you do, obviously you often see doing dark washes and things like that, and washes for panel lines. But another thing you do, if you take some silver, we've got just some silver paint, loads of thinners, and then what you can do, you can come along like this, okay, and then just touch the sides of where you want it to go. Okay, so we're just touching around here. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but you get on there then a nice silver wash just around the edges where you need it, which is quite a nice and easy way doing it. So the capillary action takes it all round the rest of the prop for you and does a lot of the work. So if you just tap it and let the capillary action, it should stay quite localized without going everywhere, but it'll do the metal sort of gearboxy areas of the prop. So we've just done all four of them. Just give the brush a bit of a clean up there. Okay, now the other thing we've also done is we've started to unmask things like the main gun turrets. They've been done now. I'll get the camera to come in, and there we go, that's showing that one done. There we go. Okay, now the great thing with those is obviously they can be a loose fit, you can put them on afterwards and everything else. Now when you look at the pictures of the box, the turret looks different, okay, but you look through all the others and they don't look right either, so I'm not 100% sure how it's going to go. So ball turret is done, so he just needs his guns fitted, but he's going to be the last thing. So we can move all these bits out of the way for the moment. Okay, right, so what we can actually do now is start to unmask some of the areas just to have a look around and see how they are. So obviously this front turret underneath here, we've done all that now, and we've unmasked all the little ones. I've left the main one done because we're going to do some weathering around there, but this front glass one, really to see how it's looking and making sure it's all okay. But as you can see, that glass one at the front looking all very nice, and I'm quite happy of how it's all looking and turning out. Now I had to add quite a bit of more lead into the nose of this, because after all we did packing it full of lead, it's still very close to being a tail sitter, okay? So I've had to slip another couple of shims of lead just up here, up in the nose wheel, to get those in. There again, the gear is all stuck on, so we've got to get doors. We've put the intercoolers on and things like that, but I'm going to put the doors on after we've actually done a little bit of post shading underneath, just to liven it up and everything else like that. So that's really where we're to at the moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is clear this away, make a little bit of room, and we can come back and do some post-shade weathering. Okay, quick little tip, if you're doing prop tips, okay, like we're doing, you can obviously mask up, spray, things like that. What I tend to do, just put a small little bit of paint, acrylic paint, in the bottom of the pot. Okay, and I'll do this back to front, and then literally I just come along, okay, and tap it into the paint, and you take it up and you can see it. They go in just like that, giving you yellow props. Okay, then what you tend to do is make sure you stand them up somewhere where they're not going to touch anything else. So if you pop one of these along like this, okay, then actually it can angle down and not touch the sides. Okay, if we just do this last one, so say tap it in, you want the paint to be quite thick, you don't want it to be runny. Okay, and go in. Okay, bomber is basically all done. We've gone around and we've put on a few things. We've got these Bombay doors now installed. They slide up like a roller blind system, front wheels, wells, things like that. So now we can actually give it a little bit more weathering. Now what we're trying to do really is just break it up, patch it up, give it a grubby look. We've lightened some of the panels. It's had a wash, which has given them, you know, great sort of definition for the panel lines. But what we want to do now is sort of just blend it all together. So the easiest way to do that is just to take a little bit of black, flat black we've got here, it's just some Tammy XF1, just a bit on the brush, and then mix it in to literally make dirty thinners, you know, so it looks like you've cleaned out your airbrush or something like that. Okay, now the thinner it is, the more you're going to have to put on to see it, because obviously what happens is it literally just blends in. All right, so what we'll do, we'll just grab a thing, we'll just check our flow. Okay, you want quite a high air pressure because we're trying to blend it. We don't want a nice tight lines, we want them quite wide and everything else. But all we're going to do is literally pop along some lines, and you do it and it will just disappear. That is the whole idea. We don't want this coming along and literally turning into some brilliant sort of weathering that you're going to see and stand out, because this is going to be more of a blending effect than anything else. So I'm going to just do it along here. So all we're going to do is literally picking out a panel line, and you can probably see as it goes on it looks quite wet. If we tip it back, it might show a little bit more. Okay, so we're just going to pop along this line here, going to pop along ins and outs, and as I say, you do it nice and steadily. So we're just doing where they are, little bits. Let me just move that, I'll stop that vibrating. And it just sort of adds a sort of dimensional effect, giving it the effect of grime. And I know it's pretty hard to see because of the glare on that one. So what we'll do is we'll turn it over to the underside. And you should be able to see this a lot easier down here. Okay, so we can push this across. So same type of thing, where we're just going to be coming in, flats, backs to flat, some of these panels. So it's like we're going in and sort of redoing the actual panel lines themselves. And hopefully you can see, if we just balance this up a bit. I'm trying to get it into a position so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so we're just going to pop down here. So we're just popping down. Bits coming out. Okay, back to the engines. We're just going to gently blow in. And all we're doing is adding a sort of staining and sort of three-dimensional areas to it. Just trying to break up this grey, make it perhaps a little bit more grubby. For these intercoolers, and just dry down between coats. Okay, I'm just going to give it quite a bit on the bottoms of those engines just to sort of wet them up. They will dry back. Okay, and I literally just popping along, just generally going to grime it up everywhere, so into flat areas. And perhaps you might want to pick out a panel and just shade it in very, very lightly. Okay, but all we're trying to do is literally just break this up. Just to make it a little bit more. Another little technique you can do, if we just bring the camera out a little bit, is what I call swirling or figure of eighting. Okay, and literally all I do is go all over the model in sort of little swirly patterns to sort of patch in. Okay, then you can sort of go along those lines we were talking about. But because it's nice thin paint, you can literally go right over it or even flood the area, and you shouldn't really notice too much of a problem. Just going to do down here, just to dirty this up, inside the Bombay a little bit, for these turrets, down the tails. Once you're done, literally give it an overcoat. So just spray the entire area, and that will hopefully blend it in just a little bit. We were saying, so we just pop around these side doors everywhere it's had. But all you were trying to do, and hopefully you can see it starting to come to life now, is give it that sort of grimy, more warm look to the paintwork. Okay, so perhaps you might think, well, I want to give a lot more in a specific area and things like that, because I've tacked these on with a little bit of PVA glue, these side doors, and they're actually moving. Okay, you can just perhaps the engines, going over the backs of them. I'm just going to walk it back. So just dry it down between coats. Okay. And just working literally where you want to go over the entire model to give it that type of dirtiness and griminess, and hopefully you can see it there on the bottom, right the way over. So I'm going to carry on going right the way over it. Same thing, just patching up everything else. And then don't forget, if you wanted to give it some really nice weathering, you can come back now with the original paint colours and do patchworks and things like that. You can do metal effects, whichever way you want to go around and do it, it's totally up to you. So we just dry down these engines, and then we'll get on and we'll put some more weathering around the rest of it. Okay, so one of the last things we can do is give this a pigment scrub. Okay, for this, pretty straightforward, just going to use some pigments. Obviously I'm using the Flory Models one. I've got the black and the light, and all we're doing taking a little bit of light, in a bit of black, into a little lid here, giving it a bit of a mix together. Just down in these, and then all we're doing, this gives you sort of a grey, gritty type of look. And then just as you would, take some off, put it onto a bit of tissue. This way you get it nicely smoothly going on. Okay, then if we just bring you in a little bit, you can hopefully get, what it'll do, twofold. First of all, it will kill off any shininess on the model at all, but also it gives a little bit of grime and texture to the model as well. Now the thing is, if you're going to need a flat coat for this to go on, okay, but it will just give it that worn down difference in textures look. Now if it does go over the top, obviously you can get this off again, usual thing, damp cloth, bit of a wipe over. But I just found recently, I've done it on a couple of builds now, and it just gives it that nice grimy look in. The other thing as well you can do smoke stains or put a bit down the back of this engine, but it gives it that three-dimensional look to the model, because also in different lights you can catch it, it looks slightly different. And I say, if you go over the top, don't worry about it too much. So this one will go crossways at the back here, but what we're doing, not doing every last bit of this, just in certain areas, but if you get an area where it's too much, literally just come along and take it off with a damp tissue and start again. To be honest, got a bit of a fingerprint going on down there. But the bigger brush you've got for this, the better, because you can sort of blend it as you would. So I'm going to put a bit up across the back here. We're imagining there's probably a bit of a walkway. We're just trying to literally kill it back and everything. Now the thing is, obviously handleable. You don't want to come along with this with greasy fingers afterwards, because otherwise you're going to cause lots of problems. But what you can do, obviously, is overcoat this with flat. Now obviously if you're going to do that, you want to mask up the window, so you could put a little bit of masking over the top now, then redo it, or as you would feel. And there we go. We'll just pop these out so I can show you a little bit better. There we go, that's the effect we've got. Okay, camera locks in, but you can see it gives it quite a patchy look to it all. And then obviously you can go round, but I'm just going to do it on the top with this one. But we'll probably put a little bit, but obviously you can put little bits of white in to look like, you know, obviously fire marks, things like that, and everything else. But it just gives it that nice look. The other thing as well you can do is come along with a little bit of rubber, soft sponge, and that way you can go along and put it all over it and rub it and really blend it in well. So any type of sort of pencils you can think of, they really do work. But say, I hope you can see it. It's come out. It's one of those things very hard to show on camera because of the lights and things like that, but it really does give it that grind down, warm look to the model, and gives it some nice weathering techniques. Okay, so literally this is the sort of final stage. We've gone around, obviously unmasked, we've put the guns on, everything else, all those bits you can imagine. We've gone in and put in the guns on the side. Obviously they're just straightforward out of the box. We've put in the ball tire underneath. It's like a bayonet fit. Goes in, turn it, and then you can pull down a little bit and push it in as you want. Little skid on the bottom. We've got the door as if it's in anyway, and everything else is done. So really the last thing we need to get in here is the actual weapons load. Now the weapons load is pretty basic. So whatever actually we've got is just some normal freefall bombs, which are obviously going to go in the bomb bay. Two halves glue together, sprayed them olive drab green, okay? Now the quickest way to do those nice yellow bands around them, exactly the same as we did with the actual doing the props, where we dip the tips in. So we've made it a little bit deeper, just down in here. If we just bring you in a second, then all we're going to do is come along, poke them down, okay? Want it to sort of suck up a little bit, up onto the end, just like that. Take it over to a bit of tissue we just got down here, and just tap it on there to knock off the excess, to drain it down. And we'll just come in with the other one. Okay, on there, just like that. Okay, and then just coming in and knocking down just to take the excess off the end. Okay, we'll let that dry, so we'll just pop it over to one side. As soon as that's dried and gone off totally, like these other ones we've got going here, we're going to repeat it with the green, and then that way we have perfect bombs every time. A little bit of silver on the end for the detonator, and then they can go onto the racks, which we've got just here, glued onto the racks, and then be glued into the model. Job done. Okay, and there we go, we are all done. A couple of little things we just did. If we flip her over, underneath here you see we put the bomb bays in. Bit of a fiddle to put them in afterwards, probably a bit easier to do them first, okay, to get those in. And then obviously we've gone around and we've got a couple of little antennas and various things going back on there to weather them in. Literally a little bit of pigment powder and just give them a rub in just to blend them in all okay. But I hope you can see the weathering that we've done gives this olive drab, which is quite a nightmare colour to work with because it's so plain. It's like working with blacks, trying to break it up and that. The pigments are a quick and easy way to do this type of work, just to give it that sort of worn look, and especially down the spine, around the tail area, you can see it really does work very, very well. A couple of new things obviously working on this, obviously post and pre-shading, which works obviously to break up that paintwork with the pigment, so it's all like a multi-stage type of thing. But as we said, as you work your way through, if you don't like any particular point of it, it's quite easy to sort of change your mind and work through it. Other things we did, we used acrylic thinners on this one, if you remember, to do the decals, to set them in. I think you agreed, they're on there. We've got no sign of silvering whatsoever up here around the front and everything else, so obviously it's worked very, very well. The kit itself, okay, it is showing its age. It's not modern technology. There is some little issues with it, getting it to fit together, and perhaps like the detail is a little bit lacking. But when you think it's quite an old kit, having the Eduard give you obviously the photo etch bits that go with it and everything else, it really does bring it up to speed. So little things like, you know, obviously around the wheel wells, we've got these new sort of photo etch plates going in there, a little bit of cabling, things like that. Obviously the seatbelts, harnesses, the only thing is this framework around the top here, you can't really see it. But I hope we've covered a few little different things and different types of weathering with this build, and taking old kits and making them sort of up to speed and really bring them up to date. I hope you enjoyed the build, and if you have, join me again next time.